Alrighty, good morning and thank you all for joining this webinar that we are proudly to be partnering with Everpure. The VMware User Group, or VMUG, is an independent, global, customer-led organization created to maximize members' use of VMware and partner solutions through knowledge, sharing, training, collaboration, and events. Get connected to a local VMUG community near you at vmug.com. We have them all over the United States and also have them globally. So if you are looking to connect with fellow VMware users in your community, please go to myvmug.com. During this presentation, please use the Q&A function for all questions for the panelists today. They will be answering these questions live and in the question box throughout the webcast. So if you have a question, please do not use the chat, rather use the Q&A function, and this allows us to follow up with you after as Zoom will save your email as well. So use the Q&A function and please refrain from using the chat if you have any questions. And then lastly, this session is being recorded. The recording will be distributed in a wrap-up email after the webcast to all registrants. Even if you couldn't make it today, you will receive the recording in an email, and we will be posting it on our VMUG YouTube channel. So you will all have access to this presentation at the conclusion. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to the Everpure team.
Hey, and welcome to another VMEG webinar. This one's presented to you by Everpure. My name's Matthew Webb, and I'm going to have my partner in crime today introduce himself.
Hey, thanks, Matt. I'm David Stevens. We're both field solutions architects. We're on a specialist organization, and it should be no surprise. We're virtualization. We're here to talk about virtualization and specifically around beyond vSAN, how to optimize VCF with external storage.
Yeah, like to double click on that, we're FSAs or field solutions architects for virtualization. We're in the field helping customers like yourself optimize, Everpure on virtualization solutions. And so we're super excited because we know VCF is a hot topic. Many of you are looking at either planning on upgrading or certain greenfield environments, or maybe some of you are already on VCF, and we'll talk about how you can optimize your infrastructure on Everpure using VCF. So we're super excited today to get into this stuff with you. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty and the technical capabilities that Everpure has to offer, David, why don't you kick us off on maybe people don't know Everpure. This is the first time that they've actually seen a presentation from us. Talk about why we're so awesome.
Yeah, I'll definitely double click on that. We're awesome because we are, as it says on the slide, we are really the world's most advanced data storage platform. And notice we say a platform, we don't call ourselves storage arrays. We're looking to help you manage your data. And primarily that is data that lives in virtual machines. But we're a data platform, and you're going to hear more about that later on throughout the presentation. You can see we have plenty of satisfied customers, 13,500 of them. Many of them are federal agencies. Even more than half of them are Fortune 500 companies. And I will tell you, Matt and I are very happy to work here, and we know we have a lot of other very happy colleagues that we work with. And our NPS score, which is our Net Promoter Score, which is how our customers talk about us, is one of the highest in the industry. And so we're really happy to talk about how to help store, manage, and protect your data, not just your VMs themselves.
Yeah, I love the NPS score because I'm only a year in. David's been here longer than I have, but one of my favorite things we say here is the big orange hug to a customer because we care about our customers, and that's why I joined this company a year ago. Is we're customer centric. Like your experience matters to us, and that really reflects. This is just a metric that reflects that big orange hug. The fact that we're all about managing your data and making sure that you get what you need to be successful when it comes to managing your data. But we're here to talk about VCF, right, David?
That's right. Yeah. Well, definitely about VCF. We know there are a lot of people that are still on vSphere 8 and VCF 9 or VCF in general. You may not go to 9. You might jump and go to 9.1 when it's released. We're not saying when that's going to happen, but it's clearly obviously going to happen in the near future. But we are integrated directly into VCF. We can help you build this hybrid integrated platform using Everpure FlashArrays behind that. We're we have and VCF is built on core VMware technologies, and we support those technologies very easily and effortlessly also, to be honest with you. There's automated fleet management inside VCF, and there's automated fleet management also within the Everpure solution, the data platform. And we'll mention that and have a slide on that to talk a little bit about fleet management. And I'll tell you, there's flexibility to work with your infrastructure. If you pick any storage platform, or actually not platform, but storage protocol out there, we support them all. You're obviously not going to use them all at one time in VCF, but we support all the supplemental and the not primary, but the principal storage technologies that are needed by VCF.
Yeah, so let's start off with like some terms to know. And this, the VCF lexicon, you may already be familiar with it, but we have to go under the assumption that VCF is new to a good chunk of VMware customers, at least moving into a VCF infrastructure. So there's obviously the individual products you're familiar with, vSphere, vCenter, you may be familiar with NSX or operations and automation, but let's hit on some of these objects that are in VCF so we're all on the same page, right? So first, the VCF fleet, right? The VCF fleet's the higher level abstraction that can have your individual VCF instances. And it's important to know at a fleet level, there's certain management planes and control planes that are important to talk about. So fleet level, there's a VCF instance that actually runs the infrastructure that we're more familiar with, vCenter, vSphere, et cetera. VCF automation operations are those tools that run at the fleet level. That gives you the, sort of the front end self-service capability with automation. Operations is more of operating all of your individual vCenters and instances. We'll double click into that. Workload domain, workload and management domain were really huge differentiations within previous versions of VCF, and they're kind of like getting a little bit different. They're kind of becoming one cohesive. Just a workload domain is where you run your management components and your actual VM workloads. Deploy versus converge models, we're going to talk about how VCF is actually the most flexible for storage and external storage than it's ever been in the past. And then, of course, principal and supplemental storage, we'll talk about what things are supported on bring up of the instantiation of VCF and what is supported as add-ons after you have your VCF instance. So now that we know what each of those terms are, let's put those terms into like a higher level architecture. So we mentioned the VCF fleet. That's the overarching component that make up all your VCF instances. Now, what runs at a VCF fleet level is operations and automation. And so these are instance-wide, they're fleet-wide instances. And I'm sure as you guys are going through this process, like it's not the typical vCenter licensing that we're used to doing. You actually license your software within VCF operations, and it is a critical component of VCF infrastructure. So you guys are probably learning the importance of VCF operations. If not, hear it here. And then at the instance level, like I said, this is where the more familiar tools that most, if not all, customers have used at some form. And that's vCenter, where you do your virtual machine and host management. That's vSphere that actually runs on the physical nodes. That's NSX Manager if you're doing network virtualization and you're doing distributed firewall capabilities, locking down your infrastructure. And then, of course, within an instance, you can actually have multiple workload domains, which are essentially can be like clusters, if you will, within your infrastructure. So the question, why am I touching on all this? I'm touching on all this because we implement and integrate at each individual layer of this technology. We've been doing this for a very long time. We were one of the earliest companies to make a vCenter plugin. Not the earliest, but think about our founding, keep me straight here, David, 2011-ish, like product 2012.
Yeah, 2012 was when the product came out. That's right.
Yeah, we were developing a plugin during those days, right during our instance of creation, whereas other storage companies have been around for a long time and just came to that fold. So, again, we've been doing integration with VMware for a long time. And so whether you're talking about VCF operations like the FA content pack, or you're talking about automation for the management pack for automation, we have those, right? So those are going to be at your fleet level. Those are some content packs that work with our FlashArray systems that we're going to talk about in deeper level in slides to come. And then we have one of the most popular integrations is our vCenter plugin. This is, the integration that we've been developing with VMware within their plugin framework to really just make day-to-day operations super easy. You could have, our services or a partner come in and get that array up and running, and the network's plumbed, ready to go. And then just from there, you could install the plugin and be able to make your host groups and your first LUN within really just minutes instead of hours, just because of all the automation that happens with the plugin, being able to make those host scripts and make a LUN for you, go provision that LUN VMFS or NFS. So it's really nice from that perspective. The FlashArray family is what we're primarily talking about when we talk about VMware workloads. And that's because FlashArray is our scale-up system that is about providing performance for consolidated virtual storage infrastructure. And so FlashArray is primarily what we're talking about. We have other storage capabilities within FlashBlade. That's more for guest VM consumption directly, not for like data stores for VMware. So FlashArray is what we're talking about when we're talking about data stores. And we've also got technologies like Portworx for container workloads as well. So when it comes to VMware and VMware data stores, FlashArray is that family we're talking about. David mentioned our fleet-wide capability. So, VCF has a fleet. We actually can create fleets of resources, of FlashArray resources with Fusion, which is super exciting. If you're familiar with the concepts of storage policy-based management and some of the capabilities that adds to the vCenter layer, you're really going to love what Fusion can do for your underlying storage infrastructure when it comes to automation and keeping things at a known state. Pure Protect, if you're looking for disaster recovery as a service for VMware workloads, we have Pure One, which is sort of our hierarching SaaS platform for operations and management and analytics. And then, of course, this is all underlined by our Evergreen architecture, which is really a combination of like a business model and an architectural point of view to make sure that we keep you ever modern, and we make sure that you're able to have non-disruptive upgrades through the life of the system. So again, I had mentioned that VCF 9 is actually the most flexible for external storage than it ever has been. I actually came from VMware before I joined Pure Storage. So I remember the VCF 4.x and 5.x days and all the restrictions we had around what storage was supported in VCF infrastructure. Throw those things out. This is a new model. Things have changed. Some of the things carry over, but a lot of them do not. So let's kind of cover how that means in action. So if you're deploying VMware Cloud Foundation, right now you're thinking about, am I going to make a brand new VCF infrastructure with new VCF 9 hosts and VCF operations and my, the vCenter and the workload domains that we talked about before, and then take my old infrastructure and do essentially like cross vCenter vMotions into that infrastructure? That would be like a greenfield deployment. That's one way to migrate workloads. And if you are doing that, it's important to know that during the creation of VCF, there are only 3 principal storage types during only the creation of the instance. Once you create that instance, you can connect whatever storage you want. So let's walk through what that looks like. You want to go ahead and deploy a new VCF instance. You need to make sure that you're prepped for either, if you're using Everpure, VMFS over Fibre Channel or NFS v3. And of course, you still have the option to do vSAN if you choose to do so and you have local drives. But if you're going to do external storage, VMFS over Fibre Channel and NFS v3 will get you up and running. And then once you have a VCF instance and all those management systems are in place between the vCenters, VCF operations, and automation and NSX, then you can just go ahead and add your iSCSI data store or an NVMe over Fabric data store or NFS v4. So at the end of the day, all the storage options you can get to, it's just that initial instantiation we're talking about. Now, if you're doing brownfield, it's actually more flexible because it's essentially like a vCenter import. And so it'll bring in all the different storage types that you already have. So if you're going to do like an in-place upgrade where you're taking your existing 7 or 8 vSphere infrastructure and putting it into a VCF instance and doing what's called the converged model, which is like an upgrade, there is no restrictions around what storage types are there. This is only if you do greenfield, what gets you through the UI. So we're going to hammer this home. I know I've touched on a little bit, quite a bit of this already, but let's say you're a fiber channel shop and you're going to do that exactly what I mentioned. You're going to do a greenfield environment and you're going to move these workloads into that greenfield environment using things like maybe backup restore, or most people are just going to do a simple cross vSAN or vMotion. So you have to get this new infrastructure stood up. So you get your ESXi host stood up with it installed on vSphere 9. You got to go do a quick thing. You have to refresh the certificate on that ESXi host. You create the data store and data source scan for your FlashArray fiber channel connectivity, and then go refresh those on the host. So you basically have to prep the environment with this VMFS data store before you start doing the VCF installer wizard. Once you've got that fiber channel connectivity for all your hosts and that one set up, then you can go ahead and launch the VCF installer. That just ensures once you get to the section that's for storage and you select your storage type, that you can get move along by putting that information in. Now, if you're an Ethernet shop, maybe you do iSCSI and that's your primary way of servicing storage workloads in your VMware environment. One thing you could do is just go ahead and deploy on NFS v3. So a similar process. You install vSphere 9, you refresh the certificate. You're going to have to do some things on the FlashArray, like make your VIF for your file server, and then you have an export policy, and you have to create that file system. Then you launch the VCF installer, and you go ahead and fill out that the NFS mount point connection and the server information. Once you get your VCF instance up and running, you can go ahead and just create an iSCSI data store if that's your primary method that you prefer. So if you're an Ethernet shop, go ahead and just get started on NFS because that is supported for greenfield environments, but just add iSCSI after the fact, or if you do NVMe over Ethernet, etc. So don't want to overcomplicate this. The takeaway is there's way more flexibility in external storage in VCF 9 than there's ever been in the past. So kind of brings you up to speed on VCF and how Pure fits within the VCF specific VCF 9 ecosystem. Let's talk about why you'd use Pure for VCF in the first place.
Yeah, so that was a great explanation on how you can take and utilize a Pure array behind all of the different options for a VCF. But we know, and what's really great about Pure is we give you different choices and options for doing this. We're not a one-trick pony. And then obviously the right choice has lasting impact. So, but the nice thing is you don't have to do that when you're looking and utilizing Pure behind the scenes. We'll give you the ability to achieve long-term flexibility. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, we support every storage protocol out there, and every storage protocol you saw from a converged perspective. If you want to do an upgrade and merge your VCF or your vSphere 8 environment into VCF 9 itself. With Pure, we can help you drive down your total cost of ownership and increase your return on investment. There is no licensing. It says reduce your licensing. We have no licensing on our system, and it also helps you reduce licensing because you don't need to buy as many hosts with storage built into them. So that's where you can really reduce the amount of hosts you need in your environment. And because of that, fewer hard drives in your host also means less power and cooling needed to run those systems in your environment. The array itself, the Pure FlashArray itself, is already very efficient in power and cooling, so you get the best of both worlds. Reduce power and cooling on your compute nodes, and then reduce power and cooling with the FlashArray behind that. And with Pure, there's built-in layered cyber resilience all across the system. We support things like synchronous replication, continuous replication, and async replication, as well as it's baked in for having encryption automatically enabled. And we integrate with just about every backup and data protection solution out there in the industry. So gives you a lot of options to work with Pure and VCF behind the scenes. So we already kind of talked about this, decreasing your costs and your risk. With Pure, you can see on the right-hand side here, we give you the ability to, have multiple workload domains, but you don't need to have multiple storage solutions for each of those workload domains. So this eliminates stranded compute and stranded storage in your environment. If you want to have an area which is cost optimized, because you're going to run some development stuff there, you don't need the top end line of storage on the solution. We support that. We also are well known for our performance, so you can have a performance optimized environment. Availability through our replication technologies and VDI. We're well known for how well we work with VDI environment. And notice there's a bunch of options or features at the top that back all of this up. The next one of the slides coming up, I'll go into even more detail on each one of these. Right, so as the slide says here, we believe in built-in features, not bolt-on afterthoughts. So everything you see here is natively integrated into the Purity operating environment or the operating system that runs on our controllers. The controllers are stateless. You don't need to purchase, install, or manage separate software appliances. This integration is what makes our platform so simple, resilient, and powerful. And we can group these features into three main themes. So with Purity, remember, that's the OS running or the operating environment running on the controllers. You get unified block and file services. And that means whether you're supporting structured databases on block or unstructured data like home directories and backups on file, you manage it all from a single pane of glass, eliminating storage silos. And to drive efficiency, we bake in data reduction. It's there by default. The array is a deduplicating array, and it's always on, maximizing your effective capacity. Finally, we ensure that your IT operations are effortless. Features like non-disruptive upgrade that Matt mentioned already and live workload migration mean you can perform maintenance, means you can perform maintenance and scale your environment and refresh hardware without ever impacting your application users. So this eliminates maintenance windows and gives you truly always-on operations. I always like to say it's the last storage vMotion you'll need to do to the next version of our platform, which is what can't really be said for some of our competitors out there. And then next, let's talk about resilience and security. This is crucial in today's threat landscape. Security is super important. I have a background on security and came from there prior to coming to Pure. Our platform is built on high availability, meaning no single point of failure. And we have layered in critical capabilities like ransomware remediation. So with immutable snapshots and indelible snapshots, you always have a clean recovery point to quickly roll back to minimizing downtime from attacks that could be coming your way. For ultimate protection, we include replication for data reduction or for DR or business continuity to a second site or a cloud. And for data privacy, like I mentioned, always-on encryption ensures all your data is at rest, is secure without any performance penalty. And finally, we bake in quality of service, which lets you prioritize critical applications and ensure they always get the performance they need, even during peak usage. So when we talk about a flash array for all your virtualization needs, we really mean it. So as you see on here, we've got several options. Every flash array runs the Purity software that I mentioned, meaning it offers the same management simplicity and non-disruptive upgrades across the entire fleet if you have multiples of them. The FlashArray XL is our powerhouse. It's the fastest array we have. Well, used to be the fastest array, but it's the fastest array you'll most likely use for VMware. We do have faster ones. But the XL is optimized for maximum performance and scale. And when you need the lowest latency possible for your most demanding databases or virtualized tier 0 applications, the XL really delivers. And it boasts an incredible 150 microsecond latency. And it has 45 gigabytes, not gigabits per second throughput. It's built for the most aggressive workloads you have out there. And if you move over to the FlashArray X series, this is our core performance optimized array, delivering really a balance of speed and density. And typically with 250 microsecond latency, this is the workhorse for your mission critical virtualized applications and high performance transactional workloads as well. So when it comes to density and economics, the next two flash arrays you see are built for capacity and performance and balanced that way. So they both leverage the QLC flash, whereas the XL and the X, they support TLC flash. So this offers you a hybrid disk economics, but with all flash performance. And so this is perfect for large scale VM farms, mid-tier databases, and general file services within and offers capacity up to 4.2 petabytes raw. And you'll see on a future slide that number is actually going to increase. And then the FlashArray E is purely capacity optimized, not really performance optimized at all. This is how you consolidate all your large scale out data, backups, and secondary storage onto all flash platform while achieving true hard disk economics. So the key takeaway is that you don't have to compromise. With the FlashArray family, you choose the FlashArray or the array optimized for your specific workload tier, knowing you get 100% all flash technology and the same evergreen subscription across the entire portfolio, which includes non-disruptive upgrades. So I alluded to, 45, the size that I mentioned earlier is only the tip of the iceberg. This slide illustrates our secret sauce behind the incredible efficiency and performance that we discussed earlier. It's our proprietary direct flash module. Traditional storage uses SSDs, which have, some complex controllers that hides data from the array. We kind of threw that out. And I like to refer to a direct flash module as an SSD flipped inside out. Because what you're seeing in this picture here is you're seeing the NAND flash chips directly on a PCB board that we put directly into the array. This is something that actually can't be used by any other storage vendor out there, but it is something that's being utilized by one of the largest hyperscalers out there. There's no hidden flash in this. With 100% visibility to the array, we understand where all the I/O, all the blocks are across the system. You can think of it as we're continually doing change block tracking because we can track all those blocks across all the NAND chips on there. We're globally software defined, and because the software manages the flash, we achieve true global data reduction. And we're really well known for our data reduction capabilities across the entire array and across the fleet of arrays that we showed on the last slide. I mentioned QLC NAND, so I won't go into that too much again, but you can see that today we offer a 150 terabyte direct flash module. We are actually now shipping 300 terabyte flash modules. So the numbers that I was throwing out before, those kind of go out the window because now we can throw massive amounts of, I think up to 6 or 7 petabytes. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but god awful high numbers of storage that you can put onto a flash array, which means for anything you want to do in your VCF environment, we have an array and the storage to support you there.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty powerful because, we've been doing the flash technology since our existence. And this was an opportunity. Like we've been working on flash so long, we knew how we could make it better, right? And you think about all the products in our daily lives, there's a lot of vertically aligned systems that we use that are really beneficial in the industry. I mean, this is the obvious example. A lot of people do use this company as an example, but I can't think of a better one here. Apple. I mean, Apple makes their own hardware as well as their own software. And you can think of something similar here. When you are a really good software manufacturer and you really know the technology, you start realizing the limitations of commodity hardware, right? And being able to take advantage of that. So that's really awesome stuff.
Yeah, I like to say we're a software company with a hardware problem. Which is exactly the same way that Matt just described Apple. I mean, they're a software company. They just happen to make hardware that their software is able to take advantage of.
Right, absolutely.
So you'll see here, and I like to call it this little logo that's on here, this little icon here, about deploying and provisioning in minutes. When the FlashArray was first released, Kaz, who was our remaining founder of the company, he actually had a goal that in order to get a FlashArray up and running and deployed in minutes, that it had to be simple enough for a 7-year-old to do. And it just so happened it was his 7-year-old. So that looks like a tent card, but it literally was a business card, one-sided. And his 7-year-old was able to provision and get an array up and running in minutes. Now, over time, we've added a lot more capabilities, but it still boils down to a tent card now with his double-sided today. But that tent card is all you need to deploy and provision a FlashArray and get it up and running. And I'm jumping ahead, but our vSphere plugin also ties directly into here to make it very simple for you to get a FlashArray up and running for a VMware environment, specifically vSphere. We're beating this to death, but the non-disruptive everything. I was at a local VMUG yesterday and I was talking to an existing customer, and there were a bunch of new folks in there that knew of Everpure, but they didn't really understand what non-disruptive meant. And frankly, when I first got here, I wasn't real sure that it actually worked because I've worked for other storage companies. And when I saw the first internal video of how this works, I was shocked. Turned out this customer I was talking to yesterday, he kind of took over when I talked about non-disruptive everything in the VMUG and mentioned that they used to do upgrades off hours on the weekends. He then told me later on that his boss will no longer allow him to do upgrades on the weekends so that he can have that time back in his personal life. So they actually do all their upgrades. That's the purity upgrade, the software piece, and the upgrades of the physical controllers when they need to upgrade to the next release of the platform during normal business days. And as it says down below, we've got 6 nines of availability uptime. And that's not based on, hey, if you have maintenance windows, that's not counted in there, which is what some of our competitors do. This is all at all times. So all the information you see in here is really low touch and easy and makes the FlashArray a superb solution for VMware.
It's such a I'm so glad you double click into it because NDU or non-disruptive means a lot of things for a lot of different vendors, but it inherently is very different with us. And we've been talking about this for a long time. Just continuing to hit, and we'll talk about this a little bit more on another slide. Like a lot of non-disruptive for other vendors is like, yes, you're online, but there is a performance impact of moving data. Sometimes we have to move data because there's just no other ways. If you think about capacity consolidation, but like when we don't have to move data, that's the best thing. And that's what we take into a lot of these upgrades, like controller upgrades, right? Like, typical storage manufacturer from another company the upgrade to another system's like a data migration to that system. For us, a controller swap these are stateless. So we can pull, controller 0, replace it with the new one, and then controller 1, and then replace it with the new one. So yeah, I mean, we may be, beating a dead horse here, but like non-disruptive took me a long time to really understand the difference with Everpure around that. It's a great call out.
Yeah. And this is another one where we're kind of rehashing the same stuff we've mentioned already. Is when it comes to storage protocols, we support everything. You'll even notice the vVols is still on this list, and it's on the list for a reason because vVols is not dead yet. I like to use that little analogy from what's the movie? Monty Python. So it's not dead yet. It does have an additional life beyond the vSphere 9. I believe it's around 9.2 or 9.3. I don't remember the numbers. Check with your VMware team to understand that, but you can still utilize virtual volumes, and we have probably the best virtual volume implementation out there. So rather than continue beating this to death, just know that we support every storage protocol out there, which means you can do slice and dice the array any way you want for your VMware environment. And then lastly, we kind of alluded to this fusion. Matt had it on one of the slides talking about what is pure fusion. Well, this is not a feature. It's not a product. It is just an evolution of the actual Purity code running on your arrays. We call it Pure Fusion because that was the internal project name. It just managed to come out as an actual feature, as we like to refer to it. So you'll see here on this slide, we're talking about multiple arrays. So today, before Fusion was around, if you wanted to manage multiple Pure arrays, you had to open multiple tabs to manage each of those arrays. Think about it when you're trying to set up replication. We need a special an access key from one array so that the two arrays can communicate initially, and then they exchange certificates to keep that secure going forward. But that can be a pain in the butt depending on how many arrays you have in your environment, and you want to manage them and get them upgraded. Well, with the fleet or with Fusion, we have this concept of a fleet that Matt referred to, very similar to the same technology that's being utilized in VCF today. So now you can take and manage any array in the fleet from one array. You don't need to continue moving back and forth. So that replication scenario I mentioned, you can set that up directly with from one array and have that and understand how that's working and go back and forth between the fleet view within the Purity environment to see all that data. There's no separate license. There's no additional work you need to do other than just simply upgrade Purity in your environment from up to the semi-latest version of the code. And then everything else in there is fully backwards compatible. And so this really helps improve and simplify overall provisioning and management of your arrays themselves, and eliminates risk and enforces proper configuration too. Really, really cool. New, as it says here, new management paradigm for your Pure arrays.
Very cool. Well, now we're going to move into more details around some of these integrations we talked about. So what David hit on is why FlashArray is such a great product in general, right? That's just not VMware workloads, but that's why it's been a great product for other workloads as well. Now we're going to jump into like, what have we done to integrate into the VMware ecosystem, since we talked about how we already plug into that VMware VCF ecosystem. So the most popular one that people know us for is the vSphere client plugin that we started developing almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. And so this uses the vSphere plugin framework to plug directly into vCenter so that you have basically a place to go for all your Pure data. And that's not just at the main page. That's actually throughout the host and infrastructure level view. One of the biggest benefits you'll find, maybe you're uncomfortable with the fact like the client plugin actually does operations if you choose to let it do so, but you should at least install it so you have what LUN is that actually on? Like what, I have a VMFS data store, and I think we've been in a troubleshooting scenario where we're trying to troubleshoot a LUN, but we didn't line up the naming correctly just because someone fat fingered something wrong, or maybe they got the name wrong, and you got the front end VMFS data store different than the back end LUN. You know, maybe you have to, use serial numbers to align that. Wouldn't it be nice to just be in the vSphere plugin, look at the data store, and then have a Everpure thing pop up that says, oh, it's on this array, and this is the LUN name in Purity. So again, it's that alignment into vCenter, so you're not looking, you don't have to go to the Purity operating system constantly to get data. So that's one big benefit. The bigger benefit that you definitely should take advantage of is the fact that it's automating a lot of the mundane stuff away. If you're creating, modifying, resizing, deleting VMFS or NFS data stores, that is right there in the plugin. And we know you know how to do that, but is it worth your time to go, create the backend line, add the host groups to it, go and rescan your adapters and then find it. All those steps, sometimes you get sidetracked and you're waiting for your Fibre Channel HBAs to refresh. Use the plugin for this stuff. It really makes your life a lot easier, and it's free. Like David talked about before, we're an all-inclusive licensing model. This doesn't cost you anything additional. So definitely take advantage of that. And then beyond that, we've been working with VMware for so long. We started using the telemetry that we can get from vCenter to, again, just provide more value to you. So one of the ways that we do that is through the virtualization assessment. So if you run something called the VMA, or the VMware Analytics Engine, which runs on the same code set as the plugin, you just have to deploy a different OVA. It will send that telemetry up into Pure One, and you can do an assessment, right? So you could go ahead and look, and maybe I can get away with less nodes. Maybe I don't need 15 nodes for this cluster. I could get away with 13 nodes. So it can be great to assess your infrastructure, see where opportunities of optimization is, especially with what's going on with the economics of NAND technology, right? RAM is super expensive, things of that nature. We can help here to make sure that you're meeting those budgets that you need to meet. And then we also use the same data that we use for the assessment into VMware Analytics. And so this is a view within the Pure One interface where you can go to the virtual machines. And if you have the VMA, and like the VM Analytics reporting to Pure One, you will get this view. And you can see it's layered all the way from the disk, the vDisk, all the way to the backend array. It's meant to layer these out so you can get to the mean time to resolution faster. So here's a perfect example. Like I've got some FIO virtual machines, and there's 4 of those on the screen. I can click all of those, and you can see here in the middle, I can actually expand these and look at the latency and the IOPS over time. And this is a longer term too. A lot of the things in vCenter are only 30 days. We can keep these up to, help me, David, I think it's like up to 3 months is like the
Yes.
default. There's some around that. So
Yep.
again, longer term, more analytics, something you can actually identify and troubleshoot issues and get to, quickly identify those bottlenecks and help you with those scenarios. And then, of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, protecting your workloads across multiple sites. So we have synchronous and asynchronous technologies. The synchronous technology that we have is called active cluster, and so this is the synchronous technology. Very simple to set up. Very simple to use. You don't have to do any complex host, toolkits to make the multi-pathing work. We work within the Alua framework that already exists, and it's super easy to set up. We have Active DR, which is like near sync technology. Instead of specifying a 5 or 10 minute or 15 minute RPO, this is actually as close as it can get to 0 as bandwidth and change rates allow. And so that's the idea of active DR. We'll try to keep you as close as possible without having the sync part of it where we have to acknowledge the writes on both arrays. So it's still an async technology, but as close to 0 as you can give us through the pipe. We have snapshots, which a lot of our customers running VMware will do things like, data mobility, where they want to take these snapshots and present it to different systems or BI processes. A lot of our database peers that me and David work with use our APIs to demonstrate how you can refresh that production database for a BI purpose on SQL, Microsoft SQL or Oracle. Those guys are really great at showing off that capability that we have there. And then, of course, protecting your workloads from this ever increasing threat of cyber recovery or cyber locking, cyber security. We have safe mode, which is on by default, being able to protect your data so that someone can't go in and delete your data if they get access to your systems. We add multiple layers of authentication to even ratchet down the safe mode from its default. So this really does have a native capability to provide instant value to customers. We didn't show a whole lot of the deeper detail, but just to reemphasize, we have the FlashArray packs for automation. We didn't mention log, so if you're using, what was previously called Log Insight, we have a pack into that can curate the storage logs within the vSphere log, so you can correlate where those issues may have occurred if you had some sort of storage outage. And then, of course, in VCF operations, we've had that even when it was called the ARIA vRealize suite before that. And don't forget, if you're looking at the VMware offerings in the cloud, specifically like EVS or AVS, we also have cloud offerings as well. That's our Pure Storage Cloud capability. In Azure, we actually have a new offering called Pure Storage Cloud Native, and that specifically is working with AVS. So if you are noticing, you only get one node type in AVS, and that can really be a limiting factor in how large your clusters have to be because the storage number may be really high. This is where Pure Storage Cloud can really help you out, being able to bring down your node costs and be able to not have stranded CPU and memory resources on top of that. And we still bring all the same benefits that we talked about with FlashArray to the cloud. So data reduction. So, especially in our Pure Storage Cloud dedicated offering, if you're looking at lowering your managed disk costs, you can certainly do that with Pure Storage Cloud. And then if you're wanting to replicate between on-prem FlashArray resources into the Pure Storage Cloud ecosystem and move data back and forth for data mobility, you can do that as well when it comes to using Pure in the cloud. So again, this is double clicking into the real value, especially if you're looking at the VMware workloads in the cloud. AVS and EVS, you're able to reduce your node counts if you're storage bound in that infrastructure. So a great example here, maybe we needed 10 nodes, for example, to service the storage workload for HCI storage and vSAN. But with Pure Storage, we only really needed a compute and memory need on the host of like 5 nodes. So we're able to reduce the node count by like 50% and make sure we didn't have stranded CPU and memory workloads or capacity that we weren't ever going to use. All this is backed by Evergreen. Just to reemphasize, this is both a business methodology as well as an architecture philosophy. The idea is all-inclusive licensing, non-disruptive upgrades, no end of life, sustainable and efficient, and no forklift upgrades. This is how our engineers approach our products, right? When we're coming out with a new feature or we have new hardware that we need to refresh. The first thought is how do we refresh it into existing installs and not disruptively affect how our customers' existing infrastructure is running. That is the methodology architecturally. And then also bringing value to existing installs of our customers is how we think of this. So it's both a business philosophy and there's economics around it and lower total cost of ownership around it. But also the engineering architecture of how we approach technology is based in this. We have over a decade of a proven track record for this. We have customers that started really early with us that have been able to see this over a long time. Some other companies are starting to mimic, that's the biggest form of flattery of what we're doing recently, because this has real business value. So like we've got customers that started on like an FA420, they scaled up. We came out with a new system in 2015 and we did that evergreen controller upgrades and your 30-day money back guarantee. We provided more value by creating Pure One. That didn't always exist. We talked about the capabilities today, but Pure One came out, so they have more telemetry to look at to make new reporting and manage their infrastructure. We introduced things like the right size guarantee to make sure that when you get your infrastructure, as long as we collaborated on it, if something's off, we will make it right for you, right? That is, again, another reason why our NPS scores are so high. Then we started coming out with things like Evergreen Forever, which is what you mostly know us from with the Evergreen architecture, but also Evergreen One, which is our storage as a service offering, being able to service your workloads on an SLA basis and not just guess at what we'd be able to do from a latency or performance perspective as a service. And then, of course, that innovation continues on with the XL R5 and the increases that we can do in total I/O and throughput. There's even more exciting things ahead when it comes to how we're going to continue to take that evergreen mindset into days to come. So that covers a lot of the content me and David wanted to share with you. David, maybe you want to go over some of the offerings we have here and how they can learn more about Everpure.
Yeah, so we got obviously scan the codes here to get to our VMware platform. Look at our demos. The Pure 360 demo platform that we have on our website is really great for seeing some of the things that we talked about today in action. It's not us doing the demos, but it's folks on our team that are doing the demos, and they're really, really useful and informative. I really like the one around the plugin. It really goes into great detail and really shows off just how more efficient you can be by using the plugin. And then if you want to learn about any of the products that we mentioned, primarily the XL, the X, and the C, as we mentioned, the E is not really meant for running workloads on. It's really to help you get spinning disk prices at FlashArray costs. And so click on that or scan that QR code to learn more about our overall solutions.
And then I'll also mention the VMware Platform Guide. Keep an eye on this. We keep coming out with new content. We've got a couple of the quick start guides for VCF 9 that you'll likely want to check out, especially when we talked about the nitty-gritty details of what those screens look like when you add Fibre Channel or NFS data stores into new VCF 9 instances. But that covers pretty much everything we had today, so we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you all for joining. Wonderful presentation by Everpure. You all see a QR code on your screen. Feel free to scan it and you can see all future VMUG webcasts. VMUG Connect. We have VMUG Connect Amsterdam coming in just a few weeks. So if you plan on being anywhere around any of these major cities, please register for VMUG Connect. It is our new event model, and we are so excited to see you all there. Thank you for joining. As I mentioned before, this session was recorded, and the recording will be distributed in a wrap-up email to all registrants. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be prompted to fill out a survey. Please fill it out. It helps provide you fresh, relevant content in future webcasts. So it takes about 30 seconds. Please fill it out. And lastly, use code COMMUNITY for 10% off of a 1-year VMUG Advantage membership. Thank you all for joining, and have a great day.